All right, so let's go into Retatrutide. This is one of the newer peptides. It's like the next generation of, or the next iteration of GLP-1s. So if you're looking at things like semaglutide, which is Ozempic, or you're looking at tirzepatide, any of those, this is kind of the next step forward. And there's a couple of different things that you kind of have to kind of know about this one that's really kind of great. If you're wondering what it looks like, I'm currently running it. Every time before I will recommend anything or work with anybody on specific stuff like GLP-1s, I'll run them for 8 to 12 weeks just to kind of see how they feel. It's an ethical thing for me. I don't like to recommend stuff or talk about stuff that I don't have personal experience with. So that's kind of one of the main reasons I do it. This one, because I've run semaglutide, wasn't a huge fan, didn't like the way it made me feel. And it was a little bit more difficult to titrate. This one is really nice. So I based this one off of what I did last time, still running my 47.1s, still taking everything, lifting the same way. My strength has not diminished at all. It's going to maybe a touch. And I'm down about 10 pounds, 8 to 10 pounds, depending on what day I'm weighing, from about 12 days ago. Most of that I'm assuming is fat because one, I'm much the visibility of the leanness, if that makes any sense. I look a lot leaner than I did 2 weeks ago. And I feel leaner. One of the big things is that I feel like there's less visceral fat, which is a big thing. So not a whole lot I haven't had any real gastric issues, haven't had any stomach aches or anything like that. So let's kind of run into real quick. If you guys want to watch, I'm doing like every Tuesday and Saturday, I'm doing some posts on just check-ins, like how it looks and that type of thing. So you can go back and watch those and kind of watch the progression of fat loss if you guys want to kind of check out a in-process experiment. So let's run through kind of what Retatrutide is. So Retatrutide is a triple function. So it hits GLP-1 receptors, it hits GIP, and it hits glucagon. So the difference in this one is that it not only helps it goes through the whole spectrum. So it helps activate glucagon, which is going to help create a little bit more regulation in sugars. It's going to help the liver kind of reset that and process that out. And in the process, I think that's where you're getting a lot of your non-hepatic, the steatosis, or the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This has been shown to start kind of winding that back, which is phenomenal from a health perspective, regardless of fat loss or weight loss or anything like that. Cleaning up the liver is extremely important to long-term health. So if that's one of the things you've got, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, this is one of those things I would definitely look at. I want to work with somebody who knows what they're doing on this one. One of the downsides to Reta, and some of this stuff is still seen very, very rarely, but it is something to watch out for, is hyperglycemia. So one of the pathways that this happens to hit is the glucagon function, which means your body's going to utilize fat as a fuel source at a much higher rate. People are referring to it as a thermogenic effect. I don't really like that term, but it's used enough that people know what thermogenic means. So basically, it's going to increase your fat loss because it's utilizing fat as a fuel source at a higher rate. So that's fantastic. Now, one of the things you've got to worry about with this whole deal is that it can, in some people, spike the glucose too much. So we can get hyperglycemia issues. So if you're going to run this, I would make sure that you either use a CGM or just pull your blood every once in a while. Get with somebody who understands the gluconeogenesis function. So while we're on gluconeogenesis, remember, your body's going to tear apart proteins in order to go through gluconeogenesis. Yeah, it's going to use fat to process this and use it as a fuel source, which is fantastic, but it's going to need proteins to actually rip apart. So keep that in mind. If you don't keep your protein levels up high enough, your body's going to rip apart your muscle tissue, because your muscle tissues are the easiest access to protein the body has. And it's going to, when glucagon hits it, it's going to be like, we kind of make some sugar. We make sugar out of protein. So watch your muscle mass. There's a variety of different ways of tracking that metric. If you're working with somebody who understands gluconeogenesis and understands how these things work, that shouldn't be a problem. So that is one thing to watch out for. Obviously, since it hits the GLP-1 receptors as well, so it kind of does everything that semaglutide and tirzepatide do, but it does more. Since it hits those, you're going to see a little bit of the delay in gastric emptying. So if you eat something or you drink a bunch of water or something like that, and you feel like it just sits right here, and you're just like, oh, I feel like I have a brick in my chest. That's kind of what's going on. And so make sure, again, you're working with somebody who understands gastric emptying function and how to remedy that and how to titrate around it and how to make sure that that doesn't become a problem. So that's one of the issues. The other one is we still have same liver functionality. So we're going to have issues with cholecystitis and things like that. So again, you have to support the liver. Okay, guys, when you do something and you ask the body to process something, go through a chemical reaction, you have to give it all of the chemicals it requires to do that chemical reaction, or else it's going to start either messing up or stealing nutrients from something else that you don't want stolen. So you're going to have to really understand that you got to raise these things up. So minerals, you got to get your minerals up. Methylated B6 is a big one. Any nutrition to the liver is going to be important. Now, here's the thing. Remember this. And I realize there's lots of moving parts in this. This is why I keep telling you guys to work with somebody who knows what they're doing. If you've got a bad parasitic infection, even a mild parasitic infection, it's reducing all of the nutrients your body has to use primarily. Secondarily, it's creating chemicals, potentially, that is going to help clog up the liver. Well, if you've got parasitic issues and yeast issues, and you've got processed food issues and bad fats issues, and you're not doing, you don't have the methylated B6, the methylated 2, you don't have, some of the folic acid stuff. If you don't have all the chemicals your body's requiring, it's going to start gumming up the works. And so that's one of the reasons that we're seeing liver issues for this. So, even injection site issues or what seem to like allergic reactions to these things, oftentimes are because the liver got too dirty or too filled up with junk. If you're processing a giant amount of fat and your body is moving that fat out, you have to understand the pathway, the lipolytic pathway that the body is using to do this. If you don't, you're going to miss components, and that's where we start to have issues. So make sure you're checking all the liver pathways. And then any detox function, you also have to support kidneys. But these things are pretty nice. Now, they do have a 6-day half-life, roughly 6-day half-life. So they're that's very beneficial if you're doing a one giant injection per week. I still am not a huge fan of that. I'm not saying that's a bad way to do it. I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it. It's just not the way I like to do it. So if you're going to do it where you do it, every day type of thing, understand that there's a 6-day half-life. You're going to have to do the math to figure out, okay, over the course of 7 days, right? How do I track the half-life function of the primary injection, the first one you gave, all the way through those 7 days to figure out where your levels actually are at? So, make sure that you're at least factoring that in if you're going to do this. It is probably going to come out as the best option for type 2 diabetics. It might help with some of the type 1 diabetics who are producing a little bit of insulin, because it does increase insulin sensitivity, insulin production, insulin function. So it is possible that some of these people that we're finding at the 8, 9, 10 years old, who all of a sudden their pancreas just isn't producing the insulin that we need, we might be able to use this in some of those people to help boost that function. This is a might. This is something I'd like to see in research before everybody starts playing with it. But just keep that kind of in mind, as this is an option that we can start looking at in the future. So hopefully someone's going to do that research so they can figure out, how to best utilize that to reset liver function. But in older people who have type 2 diabetes, this would also be a really, really great option. Again, wait for the research, work with somebody who knows what they're doing on it. But it would be probably the best option for type 2 diabetics as well, because, it helps, increase insulin sensitivity. It helps increase functionality. And if you pair that with a really good diet, especially if you pair it with a diet and exercise program, I think that it'll be substantially easier to help convert the insulin resistance issues that create type 2 diabetes and dementia into a process where we can start walking that back in. I would really like to see some research done on this with dementia, because one of the main problems with dementia is insulin resistance. Your brain communicates with insulin. If your body is no longer sensitive to insulin, if you can't hear the insulin anymore, well, then your brain's not going to work very well. Now, if we do something to help radically increase insulin sensitivity, that could theoretically help push back on the symptomatology of dementia and maybe help us walk it back. So if I was going to be doing research with dementia patients, I would 100% want to look at using this as an option for treatment therapy. It's, again, these things are great, they're powerful, but here, remember this thing: anything strong enough to help is strong enough to hurt. So make sure you're doing these things cautiously, and you're working with people who know what they're doing, and you're taking your blood beforehand, you're taking your blood afterwards. And, if you're diabetic or you have any issues with blood sugar control, get a CGM, watch and make sure you don't have any increase in glucose levels that we don't want. The only other thing is, and this is kind of the weird thing with Retatrutide that we don't really see in other places, is there's been some research showing that there's a higher instance of heart rate, which would kind of make sense if you're going to kind of kick the metabolic function of the body up, that everything would kind of come up, so heart rate would come up. If you're going to need more oxygen, heart rate obviously comes up. So watch that pulse ox, kind of watch where the oxygen levels are and the heart rate are, that type of thing. Typically what we're seeing is that it kind of slowly ramps up to about the 24th week, kind of stabilizes, and then starts kind of coming back down. So if you guys have heart issues, if you guys have, any blockages, you have anything like that, make sure that you're working with somebody who's monitoring all those things. This is also why titrating up slowly is a great idea. Everyone's body reacts a little bit differently to things, especially things that are new. We need to be very, very cautious with things that are new, because until you get a couple million people who've used it for 4 or 5 years, you don't really know where the problems may lie. One of the things that everybody needs to recognize is that the vast majority of people are highly minerally deficient. And if you want to get into why that is, just Google nutrients in food, mineral density in United States food, 2025 versus 1980. And you'll see that we have substantially reduced minerals in our foods, and your body runs on minerals. So if you start taking something that's going to, push out some of the minerals, or in this case, use up the minerals you have in the body doing chemical processes, if you increase your metabolism, you're increasing the speed at which you do chemical processes. So instead of doing 2 or 3 an hour, you might be doing 7 or 8. Those chemical processes require chemicals. And so you've got to make sure your nutrients are high. So all your methylated B vitamins, you've got to make sure that you've got, again, a good clean source of protein. Collagen can work. So that's a good option. You got to make sure that you have all your minerals, all your vitamins, CoQ10, all those things, because if your body runs out of stuff to use in this chemical reaction and goes, no, we're doing this because the receptor site told us to do it, it'll start stealing stuff from everywhere else in the body. And you don't really want that, because then you end up with nutrient deficiencies, mineral deficiencies that create serious issues. Specifically, like one of the things that we see is that there's some heart issues that derive from mineral deficiencies. There's a bunch of them. So you can get electrical issues, so VTAC and ATAC. You can get issues with contraction function. So again, be very, very cautious of mineral function as you're doing this. So this is one of the big things I had problems with semaglutide, was we gave metabolic tools to people who think the body runs on calories. Again, this is another reason why I get so pissy when we go back to the body runs on calories in, calories out. Yeah, completely ignore 100% of the metabolic biochemistry and just talk about chemistry, calories, because that's, anyway. So if your doctor's basing your function on calories, do not work with him on this. They don't understand the metabolic biochemistry. I'd be very, very, very worried about it. This is what we saw with semaglutide. People weren't giving the increase in methylated B vitamins. People weren't, titrating out and telling these guys to quit eating all the sugar and trash, because that sugar and trash they were eating was actually increasing the muscle loss they had. People aren't monitoring muscle loss. People aren't monitoring hormone function. If you're going to go into a process like this that could start damaging muscle tissue, you need to make sure that you're giving your body the hormones that tells it to regenerate that muscle tissue. So if you use, 20% of the protein you're consuming to create sugar, and then when you stop eating, your body goes, oh, we got to tear apart the muscle tissues. You need to make sure you're giving your body not only the nutrients, not just protein, but the nutrients to create that tissue again, but you also give it the drive. So make sure your testosterone levels are where they're supposed to be. You can use some of the different, if you're a peptide fan, you can use some of the other peptides for to like create more naturally produced growth hormone and IGF-1. So that will be beneficial. Now, here's the cool thing that I really want to see, and I have not seen any research on this. I'm not making these statements. It's just something I want to see later, is if we're increasing insulin sensitivity and insulin functionality, I want to see where it takes insulin-like growth factor 1 from a sensitivity functionality. So, for instance, what we see with BPC-157 and TB-500 is that it actually increases the body's ability to utilize and increases the sensitivity to growth hormone and IGF-1, which is why it heals so amazingly. So I want to see how playing with the insulin functionality, making insulin receptors more functional, is going to do for muscle creation, muscle wasting, bone density stuff, like those type of things, because I think that's going to be really, really beneficial. We'll have to see on that, and I can get any positive and negative claims on that one right now. I'm just excited to see where that one goes. It is, out of the choices that are out, I think that we're going to start seeing a big shift into Retatrutide, especially because, if you're using the Ozempic, it's like $1,200-1,300 a month. You can get this for between, $150 and $300 a month. Some of the vials will last you 6 to 8 weeks if a person is using it. If you're doing a research project on it or experimental research project on it, you'll see some of that. The thing is that, again, with anything, don't go off of, well, Ted was using X amount, so I can use that. That's not how the body works. Make sure that you guys, anybody who's going to try to do this or try to use it, or if you're going to be able to be in any research projects, which I hope you are. If you are, get a hold of us. I'd love to hear about all the stories and studies. Make sure that the titration up is slow and that you're monitoring for side effects. But this is one of the new peptides that's out, and people have been asking me about it. And so typically the way I do things is I'll read a whole bunch about it, and then I'll talk to the guys who are using it, other docs, other people who are in this field, and then I'll run it myself to see kind of how it all goes. I've run semaglutide. It's not terrible. It's not bad. This one's just easier. This one I feel like works a lot faster, works a lot better. And the side effects, I haven't felt anything like I felt with the semaglutide. So it's kind of up to you guys how you want to run it. If you guys want to run it, get with your guys, get with your docs who know how to use it, and we'll kind of see how it kind of goes. But kind of keep me abreast of the stuff you guys are seeing, any questions you guys have on it. This one's kind of cool. This one's a new one. I think this one we're going to see, if people can use it properly, we'll see less side effects and we'll see more benefit from it. So if you guys have any other questions, hit us up, questions@chalmerswellness.com, or toss them in the DMs like normal. You guys have a great day. Thanks for your time.